but it's lovely to have you.
Oh, thank you.
George. Really, I think the first time you came on my radar was when you were on the breakfast telly and you gave us a shout out.
Yeah.
And honestly, I was like, who's this guy? This is great.
No, I talk about you all the time. I think the work you're doing is absolutely brilliant. And, you know, for with what I do, where I'm traveling around schools and I get messaged by so many teachers, I'm constantly, you know, pointing people in your direction, because I think it's such an important thing, given the current state of education so many teachers find themselves in, you know. So no, thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you for that. That's so good. So, I mean, for everyone who's joined us, thank you. I will just say who I am quickly, but I actually think most of the people logging on will know who you are, Lee. But we can both do intros just in case.
Yeah.
So, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our pithily named Step Away from the Inbox little live chat. We're going to be talking about technology, boundaries, how it affects your life, how you can stay well, all of these good and important questions for educators today. My name is Gemma Scotcher. I'm the Director of Communications and Public Affairs at Education Support. If you don't know Education Support, we are a charity that is 147 years old, so we've been around the block. We've always had supporting educators at the heart of everything that we do, and we are laser focused on mental health and well-being. So that's what we do, that's what we talk about, and that's the angle we'll be taking today. And I'm really, really happy to be joined by the brilliant Lee Parkinson, Mr. P. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, thank you. Right, Alan. Yeah, so I'm a primary school teacher. I've been teaching now for 16 years. I work part-time in my school, and then the other part of the week I run a business where I do sort of CPD training for teachers, which mainly focuses on the use of technology to support learning in the classroom. But I'd say over the past few years, it's sort of, because what I found was happening is I'd go into schools and I'd do a day's training where, you know, I'd share all these ideas for how you can use the technology in class, and I'd visit the school again maybe a year, 2 years after, and not much will have been implemented. And then I started to realize that if teachers don't have the time to explore these new ideas, they never make use, they never implement it. So I started sort of changing my training a little bit, focusing on how the technology can actually help us as teachers do our job better, more effectively, more efficiently, and sort of strive for that working smarter, not harder through technology.
Brilliant. I think that's essential. Smarter, not harder really underpins the kind of well-being and workload situation that we find ourselves now, doesn't it? So we'll definitely get into some of that. So if it's all right, then I'll just fire away with some questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Fabulous. So the first thing that I really want to kind of dig into is the context that we're talking about here, because obviously COVID happened. Apologies for mentioning it. There's kind of this assumption that, oh, it's back to normal now, but it clearly isn't. Like, we're living in the shadow of it, particularly in schools, and we've sort of forever changed by it. And tech was such a massive part of getting through it and keeping the kids learning and staying in touch with each other, all of that stuff. So it had a really pivotal role. So what's the new reality in the education sector? Like, what are we left with in terms of tech use as a result of going through that?
Well, I think for a lot of teachers, they've probably never taken a moment to realise this. But if they did, if they sort of sat back and thought about the journey they've been on with technology over the past few years, they should all be incredibly proud, because for the majority of schools, like I said before, they didn't have the time. All this technology has been around for a while, but I would, you know, across the board, not many schools were making the most out of it. And that was down to sort of a time you can throw in budget, schools not having the money to buy the tech, but you know, a lot of teachers just didn't have the time. So when the lockdowns came in, and it was a case of, right, overnight, you know, because we're quick to forget that we brought all the children back for a day, and then we shut it down. It was all of a sudden, within a night, teachers had to completely change the way in which they delivered the curriculum, and you know, it was easily the most challenging aspect of any teacher's career, well, until the recent cost of living crisis. But yeah, I've never been more proud to call myself a teacher than to see the way our profession stepped up to those challenges.
Yeah.
Especially when it came to embracing the technology and the sort of learning, the innovation, the creativity that sort of teachers showed during that time was absolutely phenomenal. And I had a real sort of, for me, for someone like myself who's been trying to get schools and teachers to embrace technology, you know, for the best part of a decade now, I thought it was one of the few positives that came from it. Now, I was hoping that as we got, you know, we were out the lockdowns, we're back to normal, it was going to start this revolution in using technology. We were sort of going to go with certain things. Oh, well, we stopped doing that during the lockdowns, and it didn't have an impact on it. You know, it didn't stop anything. You know, do we need to carry out, you know, you take SATs tests, for example, just off the top of my head, you know, we didn't do that for 2 years, and it didn't have any impact, really, you know. And there should have been a discussion there saying, is that something we need to do? Do we really need to put children under that unnecessary pressure, and schools and so on? But what was frustrating for me is for a lot of schools, we've sort of gone, not all, but for a lot of schools, we've sort of gone back to what we always did, which was a little bit frustrating. Plenty of schools have seen the benefits. I think it came down to the type of technology you were using and the sort of tools you were using during lockdown, because, you know, there were certain tools, some schools sort of went, right, we use it, I don't know, you know, Microsoft Teams, but we're using that right across the school. And, you know, is Microsoft Teams accessible to EYFS Key Stage 1 children? Probably not. So for those teachers, they probably were desperate to get back in, you know. But I think if you're using the right tools, there were tools that we can continue to use day in, day out in the classroom. And it can just really support children in lots of ways, and can, you know, let us do our job a little bit more efficiently, really. You know, and the thing to remember is it was never a case of replacing anything. Every teacher knows that we wanted the children in class with us. But yeah, I think if you were using the right tools, I think a lot of teachers saw the benefits in that use of technology, which is a good thing, really.
Yeah. And so what were some of those positives? And I'm thinking especially around the kind of teacher experience, some of that workload and effectiveness and efficiency stuff. Like, what's been some of the, you know, the positives of all of that pivot?
Yeah, so I think for me, technology can streamline things. I think there's the opportunity to make certain tasks a lot more streamlined, which is what happens in so many different industries now. You know, and education is never going to be you know, it's never going to be something where we go completely paperless like a lot of other industries, and we don't necessarily want that. But there are certain things that can, you know, so I come across schools where they got photocopying bills coming, you know, in the tens of thousands a year, and they're just unnecessarily doing that out of routine. And a lot of teachers don't quite realise the time element that goes into photocopying and printing to stick in a book for someone who's not been in a classroom for I don't know how many years to have a look at. And that for me is something that can just be instantly changed through tech.
Yeah.
So if you've got devices in your school, there are plenty of apps, plenty of tools. I mean, in our school, we use something called Seesaw. There's the likes of Class Dojo, Showbie, Google Classroom. And these tools should effectively act as like a digital exercise book. And so if a teacher can snap a picture, record a little bit of video, depending on the task that the children are doing, and then evidence that on one of these digital platforms, you are instantly saving yourself, at least 20 minutes, half an hour. If you think about the alternative of, I'm going to take a photo, I'm going to send that to my computer, send that to the printer, get down to the printer, realize the printer's jammed, or the Wi-Fi's dropped out, or whatever it is, or year 6 are printing every SATs paper known to man. Let's come back. And then it's that time element. And this is what, for me, is the most important thing to a teacher. Like, we work with the hardest working generation of teachers ever. Right? Statistically, we are working more hours than any other generation of teachers. 50 to 60 hours, I think the average is. Yeah, and I think that the reason for that is that as a profession, we are the least trusted generation of teachers. And
always proving, always showing.
That's the point. And that can create a very negative mindset in you as a professional, that you're constantly questioning yourself. You never feel like you're good enough. But we don't mind working hard. Like, teachers don't mind working hard if we know the work we're going to do is going to have a direct impact on teaching in the classroom. The problem is, so much of our time is being spent on sort of proving that we're doing the job the vast majority of us are capable of doing.
So do the work, and we have this, and then prove.
Yeah. Like, if we were taxi drivers, we'd be the worst taxi drivers in the world, because you get in our car and we go, "Where are you off to, mate?" And you go, "An airport." And we're right, we'll put it in the sat nav, because that is the quickest, most effective way of getting us there.
Yeah.
And it logs everything so we can check where we've been. But we'd still be going, just sit back for a minute while I handwrite the journey in minute detail, just in case someone wants to have a look. And we've got to change that mindset, because it's no good for anyone. And I'm not, that has to come from the top.
Yes.
But then teachers can almost be their own worst enemies with it, because we're creatures of habit. And if it's something you've always done, moving away from something, it can be, can be hard to do that.
And especially if you're so pushed for time, it's hard to take those reflective moments of, is this the right way to do this, when it's literally just about chasing seconds on the clock each day.
And it's that initial idea of, if you are going to embrace a new piece of technology, you're going to have to put a little bit of time in short term to get your head around it, to then benefit long term. But some schools teachers, they won't even give themselves that short term bit of time to, do you know what I mean with that? It's sort of so I have a massive, like, I think one of the most pointless things teachers do, and I know loads of schools do it, and I'm speaking more primary, so they'll have a platform like Seesaw, Class Dojo, and they'll be encouraged to use that to evidence learning, but then still be expected to print a QR code to stick in an exercise book, right? Now, I say this is now the most pointless thing a teacher can do. It's even more pointless than writing VF in a child's book when you give them verbal feedback, because that in itself is pointless. And I say to teachers all the time, like, why is that most pointless thing you can do as a teacher? Well, what do you need to be able to scan a QR code?
Yeah.
You need a device.
You
just have the device there.
Yeah.
So, but it's almost as if, because we're driven by this fear, it's like a fear-driven system we work in education, that obsession with the accountability, that sometimes we don't even sit back and sort of go, why are we doing that?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
I think you're 100% right that so much of that comes down to culture, and I will definitely get onto that. I've got a question for you about culture. But I just, in terms of like this title that we've given, Step Away from the Inbox. I want to ask about technology and how it can, maybe we have seen a bit of a shift towards a kind of always on culture that prior to the tech shift, maybe, showed up in different ways in schools. But now if you throw tech into the mix, you're busy anyway. And then you've got the kind of always on, like, how can teachers insulate themselves from this when you're already busy and you throw tech into it as well? What's some of the things that we can be thinking about in terms of just not losing ourselves down that always on rabbit hole?
And it is really, really important, because there'll be there's plenty of teachers that will see technology as a tool that's now added to their workload, and I think it's really, really important to just set yourself boundaries with it. I think boundaries are crucial, both as a teacher and outside of school, the way we interact with technology. And it's very easy, like, these tools are designed to be addicted to them, and it's very easy, I struggle with it. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm perfect and I set boundaries and stick to them all the time. I get the difficulty, and you've got that FOMO, fear of missing out on the next thing, and and there's that pressure within our job to constantly feel like you're always available and you're always and that needs to change. So even outside of the tech, the culture of what makes a good teacher shouldn't be that you have to sacrifice your own well-being and mental health, which far too many teachers buy into, by the way. But within tech, it's this as much it's setting boundaries. So you know, I try, and I've become much more aware of this with my own children as well. So I've got 12-year-old triplets, and they've got their own mobile phones, and, you know, I've set them screen time limits. They have, and you can do that on any device you've got, where you can set a time where they're allowed on it. I can set how long they're allowed on certain apps. And because I want to, you know, demonstrate and be that role model, I've also implemented it on my own devices as well. So, you know, I will have a period of time where I'll be on screen or doing whatever it might be, and then I try my best to keep to those time limits.
Yeah, time limit boundaries, they're important. Yeah, it's a struggle. Yeah.
I know, like with Class Dojo and Seesaw, again, you can put working hours in there. And I think as a whole school, you've got to make those boundaries clear with parents as well. I think that's where some of the struggles can come, in not making it clear to parents that between this time and this time, you can message, you can email, but you will not get a response, because, you know, we want our teachers to be the best when they're in class with your children. And if they're going to be up answering emails into the evening, you know, and this is going back to what I was saying about that mindset shift, in that teachers are, what sometimes they don't realise is they are the most important resource in the classroom. And so much other stuff that they take time, you know, it's like I talked about in the summer with displays, and, you know, you go on social media and these people posting all displays, and that creates this guilty feeling that I'm not good enough, you know, and ultimately displays don't really matter, you know. I don't think
presence and energy and engagement is more important.
Yeah. I think most teachers do it because they find it therapeutic. The displays are more for them. They want to work in that sort of environment, which is absolutely fine. Because if you're taking the time to switch off, recharge your batteries, so you can have that level of energy and enthusiasm when you're in class with your children, that's going to have the biggest impact over everything else. So it's finding ways to do that. And if it's a case of, you know, setting boundaries with your social media, setting time limits and working hours with on your emails, and just finding ways to be able to switch off, because teaching can be an all-consuming job. Which is why we've got
this.
Pardon?
I always think setting that auto reply of when it is that you're actually going to be doing responses. Rather than this expectation that if a parent emails you at 7 p.m, there'll be a response waiting for them at 8 a.m. before they're dropping the kids off. I met one
teacher once, and his golden nugget of advice, so this didn't come from me, he said, never reply to the first email. If it's important enough, they'll always send another.
I love it. Yeah. I think what you are talking about is protecting your energy, right? And whenever we run sessions with teachers, we always say that, like, looking after you is actually the you know, one of the most effective acts of professionalism that you can take. It's not about being selfish or self-indulgent or weak or any of these things. It's actually saying, I want to be the very best that I can be. I believe in the job, I believe in the purpose, and I love it, and I want to be well so I can do it well. So these little things are all about kind of protecting your energy.
And that's what needs to be promoted more, because there is that sort of, like I said before, that mindset of, well, if you're not giving every moment of every day to this job, you're not doing it well enough. And that is such a dangerous, and you see some teachers are sort of proud of the fact they either brag or they moan about how much work they're doing, but think it's a necessary sacrifice. And it's not. You know, you for me, you can be a really, really effective teacher and have a decent work-life balance. That is you can have that. And I think on that point, you've got to find what it is that helps you switch off. Like, what you've got to try and find something outside of teaching that you are passionate about, that you've got an interest in, like some sort of hobby outside of school. And what I don't like that's creeping into education is that there's a lot of this forced well-being stuff. You know, there's a lot of this. We've got to tick a box about well-being, so we're going to do this, that, and the other. And I sort of joke about this a lot on my training, because for me, well-being has to start with reducing workload. Schools, if they want to improve teachers' well-being, the main aim before any of these other gestures is to reduce workload, to give teachers time. You know, forcing staff to do a yoga session is not going to improve their well-being, because I couldn't think of anything worse, right? And I imagine majority of teachers are sat in the hall doing the downward dog, probably thinking, I've got 4 sets of books to mark after this, because there's another book scrutiny tomorrow.
You mean
and
you don't want to hang out in leggings with your colleagues?
Yeah. But, and we don't even really, you don't see the irony with it, you know? And so for me, well-being is completely and utterly subjective.
Yeah.
What works for me is you know, I do a podcast with my brother.
Yeah.
Right? So my brother's a HLTA, and honestly, he entertains me a lot, because honestly, I do not know how he functions as an adult. Some of the stuff he comes out with. Now, I can't turn around to anyone else and be like, are you struggling with your well-being? Why not doing a podcast with your brother? Because you might not have a brother, or your brother might be normal, you know? So some people love a bit of yoga and all that, and by all means, fill your boots.
What we do know from the evidence is that culture matters. And that what I mean by that is that what is the stuff that's going to give you the resilience in school to be able to cope with all the BS? It's good quality relationships. It's psychological safety, being able to show up as a human, not feeling watched, feeling more trusted, feeling more autonomous. All of these things that honestly can be a battle to implement in school cultures. So that is a segue into my question about culture. Like, I think this stuff does start from the top. So when it comes to the tech, when it comes to the always on culture, like, what is the role of leaders? What can be effective in terms of giving people permission to switch off?
Well, I think leaders have to lead. You know, you know, don't get me wrong. I know there's some amazing, incredible leaders out there. I know there's also, you know, it's that idea of being a boss and being a leader.
Different.
You know, leaders lead, bosses they boss, and unfortunately there are a handful there and everywhere, and it's just the leaders create the culture. The leaders set those expectations and that tone, and encouraging that work-life balance by listening to staff. I think, you know, listening to your staff, hearing their concerns, taking on board what they suggest. You know, I'm very, very thankful of my SLT, because I wouldn't be here doing this had it not been for my SLT giving me the opportunity. And I think it's recognizing the strengths within teachers, because we're all different. You know, we're all different. We all have our own individual strengths and weaknesses. Like, I can't teach an art lesson to save my life, but I'm decent with the technology. And so I've had the opportunity to really push into that area. Whereas I know there's some staff in my school that show, you know, are great at certain subjects. And so it's cultivating what your passion is, being able to really push forward with that, lead that within your school, and just feel sort of supported. And I've always felt that, because I know for a fact, working at lots of other schools, when I decided to say, I'm going to drop a couple of days and start this business, they'd have turned around and gone, no, you either stay or you go. Whereas my school recognised, well, actually, this could be quite useful, you know, beneficial for the school, because he's travelling around, he's going to be seeing stuff that's going on, he can bring that, feed it back. And so I think, again, it all comes down to that level of trust. And I think if teachers feel trusted, they can really thrive in a school. And it's very hard for leaderships to do that when you have above them the pressures from the likes of Ofsted, you know. And I won't bore you to death with why I think they need to deep dive into a bin, but you know, whatever they say about, I mean, look, we've got to have some sort of inspectorate. I'm not debating that, but you'll never convince me that Ofsted in its current form are a force for good in education. And you look at everything that's happened over the past year, and their response to it just tells you everything you need to know. You know, their reforms off the back of the Ruth Perry news, where it was like, oh, we're going to invest more in mental health, and then not asking the question of why we need more support for that, you know. And it's like, if they seem to me like they're so desperate to now just justify their own existence that they don't actually realise the detrimental impact they have on the profession. For me, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, it is the trust
underneath
it. What you're highlighting is the trickle down, and how you know, when leaders don't feel trusted, how can they trust?
Yeah.
And where there is no trust, there is no space to be a human. There is no space to be a fallible human being. And we're not robots. Educators are humans too,
Yeah.
not robots, not designed to be relentless productivity machines. And you get better cultures when you give people the space to be humans, which I think is what you're describing when you say your current SLT said, oh, this human being is going to thrive if he goes off and does this thing over here, create other business. If he thrives, he comes back into the school and he thrives.
Yeah.
And the kids pick up on that, and the colleagues pick up on that. So it's that space to be human, isn't it? And the trust is just not there.
And that for me is an argument why, when it comes to Ofsted grades, get rid of the grades, because there's no such thing as an outstanding teacher. There's no such thing as an outstanding school. We're human. And how do you define outstanding? It's, for me, being outstanding is just being consistently good. You will have days, no matter what, you will not be at the top of your game. You're feeling a little bit under the weather. There's something happening in your life outside of school that's this, you know, a little bit distracting. And no matter what, you're not going to be at the top. But as long as you can be there and give your very, very best and strive for that everyday excellence, that's all that can be expected, you know. But a culture that strives for these labels that just they're not even real, you know, that trickles down to that culture of, right, we've got to have everything evidenced. We've got to, you know, we don't know the type of inspector we're going to get. It's a roll of a dice. So we might get someone who's fair and gives us a fair crack. We might get one of the bad ones, right? So we need to make sure we've got everything covered. And that is where the workload then increases exponentially, because, like we said at the beginning, we're constantly chasing our tails and just proving that we're doing the job that we do. And I get that's so hard for leaders to get that balance right. We
know from our research that it is the sense of purpose that keeps people going. Teachers, as you say, not afraid of hard work, absolutely happy to graft, but want it to benefit that core purpose. Whether it's the love of the subject or the love of seeing young people develop, it's all about that purpose, isn't it? I've just seen I just think I've seen that your brother's logged on. So hello.
Was it?
I think so, yeah. I would like. We're running out of time. I'd like to end with I'd love 2 final points from you. One, on if leaders can role model tech boundaries well, what would you like to see them do? And one final point for the teachers themselves, if there's one boundary you'd like to see them put in place, what would that be?
So with leaders, it's just being good role models with it, really, sort of considering the effectiveness of teachers' use of time. So if they can create a culture of trust, like I'll tell you now, like in my school, we don't do lesson observations. We don't, you know, we don't do these sort of accountability measures, because there's that culture of trust. And so, you know, if you feel trusted, you are more likely to take risks with and embrace new things and try things out. And you know, it's leaders sort of looking for ways in which we can save time, and, you know, just what's the phrase on, you know, not talking the talk, actually walking it and actually doing, you know, so leading themselves and understanding that, you know, not sending emails at a certain time of night, or, you know, it's that sort of thing. It's that, you know, do as I say. No, do as I do, not as I say. It's that sort of thing. And then with teachers, I think, you know, obviously setting boundaries, but also being aware of, you know, with the likes of social media, there's so many positives, but there's always that tendency to sort of compare yourself to what you see online. And I know a lot of teachers do that themselves as teachers, but we also do it in our own personal lives. And it's understanding that there is no such thing, like I say, as an outstanding perfect teacher. You know, I've had it before where people will message me and they'll be like, Mr. P, how do you get technology working for you all the time? Whenever I see you using technology, it's always working perfectly. I'm like, yeah, because I don't share the rubbish lessons I teach, you know. And you'll never see a teacher on social media going, guys, let me talk you through this absolutely dreadful lesson that I taught. We show snippets of things that have worked, but you've got to see the bigger picture. And we do it with everything, you know. everyone lies on social media. We all share the best bits and exaggerate them.
Yeah.
We all do it.
We
know
all
everyone
do
else
it.
does
Oh
it.
my gosh.
But then we
I look like
compare
I've got a great
ourselves.
social life.
Yeah. We compare ourselves to
Yeah.
it. And so I suppose obviously setting those time boundaries as well,
Yeah.
but also sort of not falling victim to going, oh, I'm not as good as that teacher.
Yeah.
I must be rubbish because I'm not doing that. Because what you're not...
I feel like what I'm getting from what you're saying is like, we're all unique. We all have strengths and we all have something to offer. And actually just looking at what someone else is doing well and assuming that you don't also have things to offer, it's a mugs game. Because we're all bringing something, and it's and someone else is bringing something different, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that your strengths aren't still very visible to people looking at you. Funnily enough, I do just want to give a little shout out to my content manager, Emily, who I think is currently working on a resource for teachers and comparisons and the detrimental effect that comparisons can have on your well-being. So keep an eye out on our channels and our website for that.
Yeah, I think, absolutely. And you know, I do joke about it on my, training. Oh, sorry. I think I think I lost the connection there. Are you there? Is that me? Sorry, hello? Is that my connection or? Oh.
No, I think we've cut off.
I lost you there and I couldn't.
Yeah, I think I lost you as well. Hang on, just one sec. Whose internet is it? Mine. Okay. What shall I do? You're back. Okay. I think my internet went.
Oh yeah. Oh, is that right? I'm back now. I can see you.
Okay. I mean, there couldn't be a better time for tech to let us down, really, could there? On a technology Instagram live. But I think we're at time anyway. So, Mr. P, thank you so much for all of your brilliant advice.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, and let's stay in touch. And everyone, please do go and check out our website for all the resources on tech and boundaries and comparisons and all of that stuff. And obviously check out everything that Mr. P does because it's brilliant.
Yeah, if you want a bit of a giggle, we're back on tour next month as well. So we've got the podcast tour. So yeah, anyone more than welcome to join us for a night of laughs and giggles. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant! Please send us that, and we'll share that on our feed as well.
I will do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nothing better for your well-being, is there? Mr. P, thank you so much, and to all our followers as well. Thank you, and stay in touch.
Yeah, will do. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.